You can do a lot by striking away from the centre of the cue ball and playing a shot with side spin, like swerving around obstacles or spin off a cushion in a completely different direction. But when you strike the cue ball to one side, it always slides off your tip at the opposite angle, meaning even just a small amount of side spin could make you miss by a long way. So even though it can be helpful, why not just avoid playing with side altogether?
The problem is, it's very difficult to strike the cue ball exactly in the centre, and there are many reasons for this.
To start off with, the tip of your cue is quite small and a cue ball is quite big, and it doesn't usually have markings on it, so it's hard to say where the centre of it is. You can also be fooled by what you see because you're not always looking exactly where you're aiming. If your cue's not straight on line with the shot and at an angle, that can cause you to play with unwanted side spin as well. And the very same problem could be caused by not pushing your cue through straight or having a wobbly cue action. All of these things could result in unwanted side spin.
So here's how you deal with all of those problems.
As you can imagine, there are ways to test your cue action like this, but I think we can do a little better.
To find out if they're striking the cue ball in the centre, players hit the cue ball up and back through the spots. If the cue ball comes off at an angle, that means they're putting side spin on the ball, whereas if it comes back straight, it means the player's playing a shot with no side spin. It's good for practicing, but you don't get to see what's happening when you're potting a ball. Which is why I invented this.
It's a small piece of card that shows you on every shot you play where the centre of the cue ball is. All you need to make it is a small piece of card cut to the rough width of a cue ball with a hole exactly in the middle, the size of your cue. Once folded into 3 and taped securely at each end, you can then push your cue through the hole where it should sit snugly in place. Once pushed up to the tip end so it's out the way as much as possible, the only thing you then need to check is your cue's going right through the middle of it. Because this is like having a cue ball with markings on it showing you where the centre is on every single shot. Once you push it on the end of your cue, you can then play almost any shot with it. All you need to do is make sure it's horizontal to the table and then just line both edges up to the edge of the cue ball. Then before you play a shot, you can see exactly where your tip needs to strike the cue ball.
It doesn't really get in the way that much, except a little bit when you're trying to chalk your cue. And it gives you the confidence on the shot to know you're striking the cue ball exactly in the middle.
It doesn't matter how high or low you're striking the cue ball, you can see exactly where the centre is. It will get annoying after about 15 minutes or so, but that's enough time for your brain to learn where you need to strike it. But of course, this is only showing you where the centre of the cue ball is. There's no guarantee you're going to strike it in the right place.
Because as I explained earlier, your eyes can play tricks on you.
While it may look like I've lined up this shot exactly straight, when I play it, it goes a little bit to the left. This isn't enough to miss, and it shouldn't really matter until I'm playing a slightly harder shot, where the same small error causes me to miss.
It's common for a player to think this is all caused because of the cue action, when really it's all down to what they're seeing. It can take a few goes for your eyes to align to the shot and allow you to see where you're aiming. Because I might think I'm hitting this straight, but actually where I think I'm aiming isn't the right place. But we can fix this with help from reflections.
If you look closely at the black here, you can see the reflection of the cue ball. For some reason it doesn't show up on camera too well, but with your eyes it's obvious. It's almost as obvious as this little dot I put on the cue ball to show you where the reflection is. But the good thing is if we hit the reflection, it goes straight. So if you find the reflection in the cue ball and line up a straight shot, you can almost ignore the cue ball altogether and imagine you're hitting straight through it, right towards the reflection. This should make the shot go perfectly straight. So what happens if it doesn't?
So if the straight shot you've lined up is coming out at an angle, then what you need to do is keep practicing aiming for that reflection for a few shots until the ball starts automatically going in a straight line.
This is only because you're not aiming exactly where you think you are, and I guarantee if you do this for 10 to 20 shots, your brain will correct the error and you'll start playing the shot straighter. And this will also allow you to be able to see the angles better on all types of shot.
But what if I am playing shots with unwanted side spin because of my bad cueing?
Well, the chances are this is because you're cueing at the ball at an angle, but we can fix that with a box or ball tray and a spare cue to stop the ball going further down the table.
This is a good way to check you're not doing something we usually describe as cueing across the ball.
This is where you cue up to the ball at an angle. You'd think this would make you definitely miss, but if you also play it with the right amount of side spin, these two factors can cancel each other out, and if you play it at the right speed, you can end up potting the ball. So to fix that, we're going to try to play shots while keeping our cue directly over the bulk line. But why exactly do we need the box?
The reason I've got it set up like this is because if the box wasn't there, the cue ball would come straight back towards the cue. And we don't want that to happen because we want to see if the cue stays straight on the bulk line. So what you want to do is position your cue ball on the bulk line and aim to play a straight shot along it. And then you can see after you've played the shot, if your cue moves to the left or right of the line.
When placing the cue ball on the bulk line, it's probably best not to put it on a spot or it could jump off in the wrong direction. You're then just checking to see if your cue stays directly over the bulk line all the way through the shot. But what happens if it doesn't stay on line? Like this shot, my cue went slightly to the right there.
If your cue isn't quite going along the line straight, this will all be down to your stance. There won't be anything wrong with it necessarily, it's just that you're standing slightly in the wrong place and you just need to get into the right position to allow your cue to go back and forward along the line smoothly.
This has less to do with your technique and more to do with getting your body in the correct place to cue online.
And if it seems to be going straight, just try hitting it a bit harder until you start having a problem. But what happens if you struggle to push the cue through straight when you're playing a shot? We're going to be looking at that after we find Jack from Alicante in Spain, which is there.
This does have more to do with your technique and shows you if your cue action is curving off to the side. All you need for this one is a spare piece of chalk and to get it lined up in the correct place.
You then attempt to aim the cue ball for the corner of the chalk and see if you pot the red. Okay, so that needs a bit of adjustment.
It doesn't matter what type of shot this is really, so you're best off putting the object ball on the spot and making sure you mark where the cue ball's going with another ball or a piece of chalk. Then the shot can be repeated.
Once everything's in the right place, you can then just aim for the corner of the chalk with your cue and then play the shot and see how straight in line your cue is relative to the chalk after you've played it.
So here's how it works. You place a square piece of chalk on the cushion with the edge pointing towards the cue ball. Then you line a shot up with the object ball on the spot so the path towards the chalk goes directly through the potting angle. And then you can mark where the cue ball goes with a piece of chalk or another ball. All that's left for you to do is aim for the piece of chalk and see where your cue ends up pointing. So what happens if you play a shot and you find your cues pointing slightly away from the chalk?
When I played that shot, I just pushed my cue a little bit out to the right. So I just want to practice it a few more times until I'm playing it a lot straighter. So now the only thing we haven't dealt with is what to do if your cue action is a bit wobbly on the way through. But we're going to be looking at that after we find John from Ayr in Scotland. There we go.
To find out if your cue's wobbling as you strike the cue ball, you can use some batteries, or if you don't have any batteries on you, you can just use a couple of spare reds. But batteries are better because they get in the way less, they're a little bit taller, and they fall over if you hit them.
The idea is to try to play the shot without knocking one of the batteries over, which can be a little bit challenging, but given enough practice you will get it right. And then you can always make it a little tiny bit harder by playing the shot at a greater amount of power.
So all you need to do is line up a shot. It doesn't have to be straight, but if it's at an angle, it's a little bit harder to get everything else in the right place. Then position the batteries just a little bit wider than the cue width, and then you can play a shot trying not to knock over one of the batteries. Or alternatively use a couple of reds, but I found the batteries lying around so there wasn't even a charge.
Once you master all 5 of these things, you're going to find it a lot easier to strike the cue ball in the centre. But do you really need to do that?
Playing a shot with unwanted side spin isn't ideal, but if you know how hard you want to strike the cue ball before you get to the table, a small amount is unlikely to make you miss. And sometimes playing some angled shots with the right amount of side spin can make them a little bit easier to play. I explain exactly how that works in these two videos. And remember, don't just watch play, and make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel and visit the website. See you later.